I put my work into this one sentence, which is culture shapes culture. And it goes both ways. Beliefs and behaviors shape our creative expression, and our creative expression shapes our beliefs and behaviors. So it's very fluid.
Welcome to the Earth Mates podcast. Together, we explore how to find your path from climate anxiety to community action by asking, who are you? Because just like any relationship, that matters. So get ready to be raw and real, but also playful and silly with me, Chief Relationship Officer Amber Peoples, as we discover what's possible through the lens of the 5 Earth Archetypes. Curiosity and subscription buttons highly encouraged. Welcome, my friend. Today, as we record this session, I am above the 45th parallel and we are moving into springtime. And what's kind of amazing about the planet at this time here in the north is that we are accelerating the amount of daylight we get by far faster than any other time during the year. So today alone, we gained 3 minutes and 11 seconds worth of daylight. Now, to give you a sense as to why that's kind of astonishing is that when we look at the solstice times, like around December 21st or June 21st, the time of daylight change is in mere seconds, like 2 or 3 seconds. And so we are actually spinning and moving and shifting on our axis very fast during the springtime. So if it feels like spring and fall come fast, it's because they do. And so what I want to do is just presence, no matter where you are right now, as you're listening to this, no matter what time of year it is right now that you're listening to this, or if you're closer to the equator where things stay more stable, I just encourage you to feel into that relationship you have with daylight today and allowing it into your eyes, allowing it onto your skin. And I'm going to count silently inside my head to 5 for us to have this moment to do that. And so here we go. Thank you. Now, I'm delighted to introduce you to our Metaphor Earth Archetype, Jurgis Didziulis, who is many time zones away from me, experiencing this planet from Spain. But over 3 years ago, we met as members of the first Design Science Studio cohort. During that time, it was exquisite to watch his calling blossom into a vibrant contribution. Through facilitated song jams, he mixes his passion for music and people to elevate, engage, and empower across genres, audiences, and communities. Through his musical journeys called Flux, Jurgis reminds us that we are active participants, intimately interconnected, and uniquely human. Just like our relationship with Earth. So I'm excited to have him here today to talk more about the power of regenerative music and a little bit about how we both got here 3 years later. So welcome, Jurgis. I'm curious what your version of that story is. Hello, hello.
That version is about right. It's so interesting when you hear someone introduce you. It's a little bit of what we've put out in the world. It's a little bit about what the other person interprets, but there's a whole journey behind it, and the journey sometimes is what really gives so much context and frames what we've become. Again, it's always a dynamic process with its spring, summer, autumn, fall. And this definitely has been a very long journey for me. But I think this is one of those first interactions I had with artists, which really inspired me to reconsider what I do and understand the true power of creativity and art in a social context. I think it's been at least 15 years. So I'm happy to get into this conversation and delve deeper into how creativity shapes our lives, not only the journey of our lives, the narratives, but also the lives around us, and how we do create relationships. I mean, one of the things that you started mentioning was the relationships around us and, you know, how we relate to other people. But again, as an artist, as creatives, all we do is frame things, and we create different perspectives, which in my opinion is witchcraft of the highest order. And so it's very nice to really talk about creativity and the impact it can have. So I'm looking forward to it. Very excited.
Amazing. Yeah. And I really love that word journey, you know, and even in the explanation, you started with journey and then you took us on a little bit of a journey. And that's what I think is in particularly fascinating about you, Jurgis, is the way that you present music is very much as a journey. I mean, I think any musician feels that way. Like there's a journey through the song, there's the journey through the performed version of it, there's the experience of it. But I think what was so fabulous during our time in DSS was to see you blossom into using your musical genius to host different events that extended over the course of an entire day, where you provided these moments in between for us to reconnect, re-embody, integrate what just happened into what was going on, and doing it all improv on the spot, and connect us on this journey. And so I think it was so beautiful to watch how you blossomed within that in the last 3 years, have continued to really journey through this with the flux that you've developed. And I know it was there before, but it seemed like there was something during DSS that really sparked for you. Do you feel that that's true? And if so, what was that spark?
It's funny with music is that we've become used to music as a consumable. So we'll listen to a song that was recorded that many years ago, and we think that that's the song. I believe that music is an incantation. It's spellcasting of the highest order. It's putting oneself, one being, one's consciousness in tune with an emotion. And then if you do it collectively entrain that emotion to create an aggregate feel, a vibe. And so for me, it's almost the act of repetition. You do it over and over and over again. And each time you do it over and over, you do it in a different context. You learn new tricks. There's something about, again, even if I was in a conversation with someone and I was repeated the exact same thing the same way, it would get boring and lame. Interesting how in music we like the repetition so much that we know the song and we've gotten used to the song should be just like this. Even so much so that if we hear another version of the song, we're like, that's not right. And we start to think that it's unfamiliar. But the truth of the matter is that for hundreds of thousands of years, we've been conveying a lot of complex information through song, through poetry, through rhyming lyrics, and all kinds of things like this. So the beautiful thing about DSS was that there was a moment where I think there's two very beautiful things. One is that something that I'd been crafting for so many years found itself in the field, on the ears, and in the hearts of people which have like a like-minded, say, bandwidth or belief system. And then you can explore more freely. It's like almost like as if you'd been masking conversations or speaking to some people who don't fully understand what you're talking about. And then for me, one of the narratives during those sessions was that I really felt I was coming home and speaking to my own. And one of the things I repeated constantly is like, here you can be yourself. Here you can express yourself as you are. You don't have to sugarcoat it or you don't have to censor it. So I think that was important. And I think also the idea that we were doing it so intensely. And I don't remember how many of these sessions we did, but they were over. One of them was a week. The other one was 10 days long, if I'm not mistaken. You just get better at it. So again, the principles of resonance apply, where if you're in a field that is sympathetic to the music, to the emotion, where you're sympathetic to the emotion, the music will blossom naturally. It's kind of like putting a seed in ripe soil. And I think that's one of the best things about the studio, is that you meet people which confirm that you're not mad, you're not crazy. That if you are crazy, there's people who are just as crazy as you and who believe in the same things as you do, which is very refreshing, especially for many of us who have operated as outsiders for so long. and then all of a sudden you find your own. So it's a very beautiful feeling. So I think that obviously gives the art form a lot more power, and then feeling that what you are conveying is striking resonant hearts. So I that's why I would say that was a blossoming moment for my craft.
I love that. And where it really aligns with what I'm doing with the Earth archetypes is we start with the acknowledgement that Earth is our home. And I love that you use that term home too. There's something so settling about that word, and so connected and grounded. And then I encourage people to discover their Earth archetypes. And the reason I do that is not to pigeonhole anybody. That's far from the goal. But it's to say a couple of things, which is if you're going, what can I do when it comes to climate issues and Earth issues? The first step is to go, well, who are you? What skills do you have? What ways do you think in the world? And these archetypes help with that. And they help you identify other people that have used similar skill sets and similar practices to be in connection. And then as you hinted at, but I don't know if you said explicitly, once you're grounded in that, once you've had that expression through those ways that feel really innate to you, then you can go out and work with others that are different, and it's easier. Because you're more rooted and grounded in the way that you understand the world, and can more easily and maybe more fluidly offer the skills that you have to people that are different. And so talking about this journey, one of the things about you as you're talking about, this moment 3 years ago that really cemented this coming home, this sense of connection, this sense of resonance, is that you've had this really interesting journey of political science, of business administration, of musical career that was more perhaps what people think of, like there was Eurovision in there and things like that. So how do you feel within the Earth archetype framework? Those would be in different categories, like the business and the poli-sci would be kind of my network type. So I'm curious how you feel like those were part of the journey for you that do inform what you do today, but also feel that there is perhaps this more of a settling or more of a rooting because you found this calling within music.
Well, hanging out with indigenous people, and specifically the Kogis and the Arhuacos in Colombia, they speak constantly about order. That the universe has its order and everything knows its place, and that stuff gets messy when things are not in their place. So they're very much about stones being where they're supposed to be, trees being where they're supposed to be. Even in the food chain, every animal knows its place. And I kind of believe that idea that we relate to a tribe, we relate to the universe as well through the way we serve. What are we here to perform? I love the idea, Alan Watts has a beautiful saying. He says that the earth peoples. So it's in our nature to be human. But even if we are human, then it's like, okay, well, what are we? A doctor doesn't know he's a doctor, or a medicine man doesn't know until they're healing. A storyteller is nothing until they start, casting tales. A musician is nothing to the collective until they start singing or sharing their songs. So the way that we serve the community, the way that we help also make sense of this kind of whole tapestry of that is reality, which again, I find it fascinating. The more I get into it, and I know there's a lot of people who like to talk about Joseph Campbell and the archetypes he's put forward, and that there's a whole idea that we only make sense of reality through storytelling, or storytelling is the main way we make sense of reality. I do completely believe that the words that we attribute, the concepts that we attribute, conjure the world we have around us. So it's very important to know your place. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I think that, again, a lot of people say that, I think or maybe it's a Buddhist thing, which says that it's a blessing to know your gift and then how you share it with others. I think it's something like that. Maybe I'm murdering this expression. But I definitely do feel that a human being's journey involves these two points where, or aspects, where you discover what you're good at, and then how you can put it in service to other people. Ironically, and in the DSS as well, lately we're talking about business as service, seva. Like, it's not about selling, it's about serving. And if you're serving well, then you're going to create value, and people are going to appreciate it, and you will create abundance around you because you will be appreciated. But that requires knowing, again, what you're good at and how you show up for other people so that they feel appreciation and they receive value from what you're creating for them. So, funnily enough, I always loved music because it was disruptive, even as a child. I don't consider myself as much a musician as a person who subversively misuses, and plays with music. Takes it out of its standard roles and applications, and just likes to be very kind of a bit of a misfit with it. But then that's the exact kind of attitude that then allowed me to kind of say, wait, these people need to experience togetherness. Music can do that, and not necessarily through the songs that I've written, but just by like really tuning in to their needs and saying, these melodies, this feeling, this vibe will help conjure that sensation, that feeling. So I don't know if I've gone too far or I've spoken too much, but in essence, I just feel that it is really important to know who we are, what we're good at, and how we serve others. And that is what establishes our place, not only in a tribe, but I think also if we believe that art and imagination and creativity is transcendent, it also establishes our role as creators in the universe.
Thank you for that. So yeah, it really, it sounds like, because the question started with, you have this interesting background to get into music with the different educational practices you've done, and that eventually led you to the music. And it seems like where you landed in that journey was language that I've heard around, like, there's a song that a lyric goes, longing to be longed, longing to be longed for. And this idea of belonging, and there's this amazing gentleman who is an elder that I got to interview for a podcast that focused on technologies of belonging and connection, and really emphasized this idea of cultures that when somebody is born, there is this celebration of who will they be and how will they belong, and how exciting is that to find out. How they'll be a part of our culture and our community, and so I hear that the journey was this journey for you of finding that.
It was a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of hit and miss. I thought I wanted to be on a big stage and have millions of fans singing my songs, until I realized that really didn't make me happy at all. And it's a very interesting one, because if you talk about the archetypes, there are archetypes that don't exist as professions, or there are archetypes that don't exist as professions anymore. I consider myself a troubadour. And this is something I've only embraced very recently, because a troubadour is a dead profession. Someone who would entertain the court with their music, not like, you'd have witty poetry and all kinds of kind of like little songs or verses, but it was very much about being on the spot. So today we have the stand-up comedian, which is a bringer of truth, because it's only one of the only people who can actually speak their mind without risk of libel, is what you call it, libel, or other forms of getting in trouble, basically. Where's the poet nowadays in society? The poet is the copywriter, or somebody on Instagram. It's like, where is the poet? Where's the troubadour? And so one thing is that you naturally have to go through this journey to know who you are. And I think as we live longer lives and we're much more stimulated, we can navigate. We can get tired of something and move somewhere else. But I think increasingly we find that there are I don't even know if archetypes is the right word or professions is the right word. Let's say that there are vocations or callings that might just not exist. And somehow we also have to carve out that niche for ourselves. So for me, it was very much kind of like trying this and saying, no, that's not that. No, that's not it. That's not it. Maybe it's a mix of these, somewhere in between. And they're going, this kind of works. This kind of works. And I think that many of the most interesting and compelling artists are people who have really transcended their genre. Because again, the genre is usually just there so you can create an industry around it. So country music sounds like country music, R&B sounds like R&B, rock sounds like rock. So the marketers have an easier time selling it, to the auditorium, to the segment that they want to hit. But I think the question that even I kind of have is whether there are universal or cosmological archetypes, which is, again, I don't know. Some people don't like Joseph Campbell because they feel that he frames everything in a certain way of thinking. But even if we look at old mythology, there are archetypes everywhere. So kind of like what I wonder is whether there are universal archetypes or whether they're all a construct of certain societies or they're a societal construct. And I don't have the answer to that. But I do think that to truly find yourself, you need to be ready to push that envelope, to discover new, to navigate new waters, and to not be scared to ask yourself really difficult questions. Is like, am I really this? Is this really fulfilling me? Is this really what I am? And it's funny because even as we speak and I say, this is what I am, there's always a shadow of doubt inside me. I'm always like, is that really who I am? Is that really who I am? And I question myself constantly. And I think that that's one of the things that keeps you evolving, not saying that I am as a given, as a known, but something that you are discovering and reaffirming, much as, like I mentioned, the doctor is a doctor as long as he heals, or the poet is a poet as long as he has poetry inside, and the musician is a musician as long as they have joy. And if there is no constant re-exploration or practice, then that person is not worthy of the title. So yeah, it's a it's a complicated one.
It is. It's and it's intended to, it sounds like for you, there's joy in the fact that it's complicated, or that there's fertile ground there to continue to explore. It feels like there's a joy there around that. Would you say that that's true?
I think that I love mischief. I love comedy. I love playfulness. I don't like it when things keep too still. And then again, I mentioned Alan Watts before, but I really loved his vein of spirituality because it was so playful. It was, there's no absolute truths. There's always caveats and exceptions, and there's always reversals. And the more a person has a conviction that things are like this, it's like, but actually, it's like, no, I'm very steadfast. And you're like, but maybe. And I love that playfulness because, again, returning to the whole archetypes, is like, as I explored the Troubadour, one thing a friend brought up, he said that the jester or the Troubadour, I think it's the jester or the joker, is the only one in the arcana, or within that framing of archetypes that has social mobility. It's the only one who can, talk to the king and then, hang out with the plebes and then hang out with the other people. It's the only person who can actually kind of like true navigate the worlds. And I believe personally that, again, the essence of alchemical transmutation is emotional, is to take something that is very serious, something that demands reverence, and make it light and happy. To take something which is very sad and make it comforting. To take something that is very certain and solid and kind of sprinkle it with a little bit of doubt. And I kind of feel that is what keeps the universe moving and shifting and changing. I think there's also a reason why I call what I do flux at the moment, because it basically is constant change. It's like we're not looking for for concrete age-old recipes for music. We're just looking for approximations. We're having fun with it. We're not taking ourselves too seriously in the process. So I do believe in the mischief, and I feel the mischief and the playfulness is super necessary. Otherwise, this would be so dull.
I agree. One of the things so I do actually do copywriting. And one of the things that I emphasize a lot is because there's a lot of levers you can pull, and some I refuse to pull because I think that the manipulation tactic behind it is not beneficial. But the one that I love to push as much as I possibly can is curiosity, because that will hook people. And that will get them leaning in, and that will get them wanting to know more. And sometimes it'll even get them thinking they know what it is and they want to see if they're right. So you maybe dangle them a little bit, and then perhaps they are, or perhaps they get surprised. And I think where this transitions us, that I want to make sure we spend some time on, is this idea that was the foundation of DSS. We've talked a lot about the artistry of DSS, but we're actually talking Buckminster Fuller when we talk DSS. And he did have an artistic bent to him, but that wasn't his primary mode of operation. He was an inventor. He was an engineer. He worked in these realms that were more within the network archetype. And as we look at, you talked a lot about change, and we know that the ultimate change we have in front of us as a human species for the next several decades is the climate. And so This is where I want to bring us back to, because that's actually where DSS is founded in, is as we look at the world that we have ahead of us, how do we use artistry as a tool, as a practice, to help us with the upcoming changes. And so I know that you are actively working on that with the regenerative farm that you're on. But I would love to hear more about what is it that you're learning around how music is a regenerative practice that can actually help us through these potentially dire challenges we have in front of us.
This idea that we can shape reality through the stories, through the narratives, I think is fascinating. And my whole thing is that through music is you create a eureka moment where you say, okay, well, there's no structure here. We're just flowing. And as people flow with the music, they realize that, wait, there's something holding us together. That's why I love music as a metaphor. Music is a metaphor for beautifully flowing society or a beautifully flowing tribe. And in that metaphor, there's a moment where you realize it's like, wait, we have this innate way of entering, harmonic coherence. Very much like the birds, there's murmurations or there's schools of fish and how they all move in a certain movement. And basically what we realize is that these are high trust environments. Now, that's at a biological level. When people start singing, chanting, articulating their aspirations, I personally think that that's the engineering of prayer already. When we all as a collective kind of focus on something and say, yes, this is what we all want. And without giving any attention to the esoteric or metaphysical implications of that, as a community building exercise, it's tremendously powerful. Think of sports, think of concerts, think of political parties. There's a reason why the Third Reich did as good as it did, because it had some very smart people telling people how to dress, how to march, all their symbology, how to raise their hands and prove that they're part of the pack. So we've got this deep inside us. And I find that it's a bit foolish on our behalf to talk about systems change without addressing cultural change, because I do believe that our imagination, our beliefs precede any massive systemic change. Any marketer will tell you, you need to want something before you're going to buy it. You need to really feel compelled to change something before you change it. So I think that we've got it ass backwards. We're trying to change systems without saying, wait, how do we change ourselves? And at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned the whole thing about relationships. And my whole thing is about, let's change relationships. Let's change our relationship with one another. How do we change that? How do we become more human? How do we change our relationship with Mother Earth? How do we refer to her as an animate being? How do we start thinking of water as something that is alive? And how does that affect my behaviors? These small changes in belief is actually what kind of propel us into new reality. There's people who think the cell phone was invented by Motorola or the people at Ericsson. It was actually, I think it was Isaac Asimov and the writers of Star Trek who said, wait, wouldn't it be great if there was a little thing where you talk and we could talk like this? And then all of a sudden people's imagination is there. They're like, we need that object. And so all the technology fills in the cracks. So in the design science studio, one of the beautiful things is that, again, the artist was recognized as a conjurer of reality. And collectively, in this act of co-creation, we can build these new worlds, which, again, and I really do believe in this, the quality of our realities can only be as good as the quality of our imagination. So the better the imagination, the better prospects we have of creating something beautiful. If we can't create beautiful music, beautiful art, beautiful architecture, beautiful poetry, then society can't even strive to get there. But in essence, creatives do have an imperative leadership role, and climate change is nothing more than the manifestation of an inflammatory process, which has been brought about by our poor relationship with Mother Earth. And if we want to address that issue, then we need to start by addressing the relationships. And the best way of doing that is through creative approaches.
What I find interesting, though, about the creativity piece is I do see all of the archetypes as creative, even if there's someone who is very precise in what they do, like they're the traditional scientist where they're setting up the controls and all of the pieces so that there's only one variable so they can test that variable. There's actually, in my head, a lot of creativity that goes into that, but it's just a different style of creativity. It's a different sense of the questions we're asking. And you hinted on that when you're like, well, if a song, if a river makes a noise, what is it? Is definitely a different hypothesis, so to speak, than like isolating a certain chemical within that river, or perhaps even sound of that river. Science is actually on the cutting edge of how sound can actually help us regenerate coral or bring back pollinators. Like there's interesting things happening there too. So I'm curious for you, when you kind of honed in on this sense of creativity and imagination, what do you think is the element there that is unique to the artist, the person who understands the world in metaphors? What do you think is unique to that, and how that helps us as we face?
First, I like to make a distinction between a creative, an artist, and an artisan. So an artist is a creative who feels they're serving a higher purpose, and they feel that this is they are in full sovereignty of what they're offering, and this is what they're offering, and this is art, and you should take it for what it is. And whether it's Picasso or Banksy or I don't know, the Beatles or something, where it's saying, no, this is what we want to put forward, and this is what we want to express. I relate more to an artisan, which is a person who's serving others through their craft, more like a shoemaker or a hired musician. What do you need? Let me serve you. But the interesting thing is that behind it, there is the creative, and the creative implies that they are creators. And I love this idea that we are cosmic consciousness witnessing. That we are all God, we are all a fraction of godly consciousness, getting a perspective of what is around us, and before you're a creator, you are a spectator. You're observing. You're like, wow, isn't this beautiful? Behold nature. But the moment that you have agency and you can change something, you become a creator. Whether it's just like, I can cut down that tree and I can build something. Now that may seem like something quite crude and primitive, but that required envisioning. That required you taking a figment of your imagination, putting it to work and saying, I can take that matter and transmute it into something else. I can turn A into B. And I think that the best example of this was, I can't tell you who built the pyramids, but I can tell you that they were a vision in the mind of some intelligence before they ever came to be. Which, again, any expression of creativity, whether it's a chemical process, whether it's a poem, whether it's a car, whether it's, I don't know, anything, any object. It begins with the idea that I could turn this into that. And for me, that is the essential divine gift.
When we look at the power of metaphor, of music, of art, to take action, you talked about this spectator to creator. I'm really curious how we can apply that again to the concept of climate change, and how we move from that place of stuck to action. Part of the reason I'm really curious to ask you, Jurgis, is I know that you're doing this right now when you're on the farm and you're trying to understand how is your music different when you're doing it from the lens of, I want to do this in a regenerative way. How is it that you're seeing that creation, that development, that change being something that can provide an opportunity for other people to go, oh, I can try that too?
The curious thing with the regenerative, the regenerative thing is that as we gave a name to the shift, to the revolution, or to the, what is going to help us pivot into a new reality, it was up to anyone and everyone to say what that was or what that is. The same way that democracy is no longer what it meant to the Greeks, or a constitution is no longer a constitution, or a republic has a very different meaning. It's like, we don't know, because it's always reiterative and it's changing. It's up to the artists to step up and say, you know what, I can give an expression of that. I'm going to give it a shot. And the beautiful thing is that as human beings, we copy one another when there's an idea that's resonant. When we hear someone singing the way we like, we will sing like that. When we hear someone speaking the truth, or truth that resonates with us, we will start repeating it, which is very much at odds with the IP culture we're in, where everybody protects their intellectual property and, no, this is mine, and this lyric is mine, and this chord structure is mine. And that's not the way humanity works. Humanity works by mimicking and bolstering the best expressions. And fashion is a great example of this. You can't patent anything in fashion. If somebody caught onto a trend early and everyone imitates you the next year, that's a nod. It's like, wow, that guy or that girl knows exactly where it's going, knows exactly where it's flowing. And I think that kind of idea of having a high trust environment where we copy each other freely, and that's one of the things we're doing with Flux, is that it's not that I'm designing a new genre or a new kind of musical format, is that we're playing with it and we're learning. And so people come and they discover new things about musical structure, about listening, about even how to hook up the equipment. And it's not something that I say, no, this is mine and I'm not going to share this with you. It's like, no, we're sharing it because regenerative is all about a horizontal cooperation and in a high trust environment. That's what this creative expression looks and feels like. So for me, it's all about metaphors that become synesthetic in a way, where everything starts, where the architecture sounds a certain way and the food is like poetry. The values start permeating and percolating in such interesting ways that I feel that first you need a lot of trust to just surrender. And then the thing that we're fighting the most is that the traditional economic system of protecting my intellectual property, protecting my brand, putting myself above others, saying, I'm the shit, I'm the bee's knees, and you people have no idea what you're doing, and therefore you should buy from me, or you should take my interpretation of art. It's completely at odds, right? So as we navigate into this new kind of world of creative possibility, I think trust is very important. Trust and faith in the process. I don't know if that's completely off the rails, but it kind of implies a different way of doing art. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about a genre, that someone discovers something interesting and everyone's like, yeah, if Jimi Hendrix plays his guitar like that, I want to play the guitar like that. Or if I want to do that. But then also having the impetus to also develop your thing with your vision with enough bravery, it becomes a bit troubling because it has a bit of both. It has a bit of believing in oneself entirely and one's artistic vision, but also understanding and surrendering to the idea that it's a collective process, that other people have to understand the genius and they have to love it as well. And that if they pick it up, you're going to have to give it up. It's no longer going to be yours. It's ours.
What's interesting, that's some dots that are connecting in my head, is the behavior science proves, and we're seeing it in climate studies, we're seeing it even in voting studies. Move On did a study to figure out what was the most motivating thing to get people to the polls. It wasn't the ads they were running. It wasn't the knocking on the doors. It was one thing that climate science is also proving, which is if your friends expect you to do it, you will do it. You will go vote. You will go take this climate action. That's proving to be the number one thing. And so I'm hearing that a little bit in what you're saying. The other science that I'm hearing is the science of emergence, where you have these, let's say, two things for simplicity, and they're doing their thing. And all of a sudden they come together, and then we have chaos. And the chaos is a necessary step. And then all of a sudden, at a certain point that is kind of unexplainable, if this chaos was being drawn on a graph, on a piece of paper, all of a sudden it's as if the pen that is drawing that takes a leap off the paper and jumps to this new evolutionary state. And that's emergence. And the thing that I think your share just connected for me is the element of trust within all of that. Trust in yourself, trust in the emergence, trust in your friends, trust in the experience. And so there's something about that word that I think what you're touching on really, really illuminates as a key piece of, once again, going back to this question of what can I do? It's how do we bolster people with a sense of trusting we can figure it out?
I love the idea that trust is selflessness, or selfishness, where the boundaries of the me and the we become very fuzzy, where you're doing things for others as if you do them for yourself, or you're doing things for yourself as if you do them for others. I think that's the beauty of it, that it's not for me. It's like, for me, the purpose of beautiful music is not so that people say, hey, I'm amazing. It's the beautiful music so we all feel amazing. And the more that we expand it, the better it is. Now, there's two very subversive, I would say, kind of approaches that we have when it comes to this. And the first one is that we try to make change irresistible. And that's one of the things that we talk about with the other regenerative hippies and entrepreneurs and do-gooders here on the island, is that it has to be irresistible. It has to be super cool. It's not something you have to do. It's something that's like, that is so cool. I want to do that. It's like, how are those people gathering? How are they dressing? What music are they listening to? I want that. I think that's super important. And I think that's in a world where everything has been so imperative, like you have to change. It's got to happen. The have to is not an obligation. It's just something so delicious and so beautiful that no other option is available. So there is this beautiful moment of only art can do that. Government institutions, non-government institutions can be very descriptive. This is what we have to do. This is what we should do. But creating irresistible visions of a future we wish to pivot into requires creativity. It requires vision and a lot of very good storytelling, which is what we artists have. So I really, again, that's why I'm happy working with these people here in Ibiza, because they're like, we know the agriculture, we know the systems, but we need to come up with a way that is so compelling that nobody wants to read the manual. They just want to get in and play with it and get in on the action as soon as possible. And I think that that's something very beautiful about the co-creative process, is that nobody really knows how it's supposed to go. As you go into the unknown, the only thing you're going to discover is something new. It's something which you know what it won't be like more than you know what it will be like. And when you hit it, you'll know, because you go, that sounds completely different. And that's actually one of the ways that music innovates. Somebody cranked up their guitar amp too loud. It's like, we've never heard that before. Or someone completely misused the synth and is like, oh, that sounds amazing. Or someone in New York decided to do something pornographic with the turntables, and it's like, oh, that's exciting, you know. So in this idea of having that kind of subversive, playful attitude, and really, again, we return to the subject of the trust, really saying, like, let's go forward without knowing where we're going to get, I think is super necessary.
So what I'm curious then is, within this drive to create, this drive to innovate, this drive to imagine, I'm curious where you feel like the element of reciprocity exists. I heard it a little bit when you were talking about the farmers, when they were talking about, we have these systems to contribute, we have this soil to contribute, we have this manual to contribute, and now we're seeking a piece that we know that we're missing. And it sounded like you as the artist get to build through the reciprocity of what they've created there with the farm. But I'm curious about, in this larger construct of trust and imagination and change and mischief, how to make sure that we're grounding that in reciprocity and not just ongoing extraction.
It's not so much about reciprocity in the sense that I have to do for you what I would do for myself, but it's serving the creation. There's a saying I love, is like when I'm playing music, I'm not serving the people in the circle, I'm serving the music. And when you serve the music, you're elevating everybody's collective aspirations, not to what is, but what potentially could be. I know that many people think that could turn into some form of artistic fascism as well, where it's like, oh, like I have the vision, everybody follow me. But again, I don't believe in absolutes. And usually when I say one thing, there's always an inversion or there's a contradiction. But in this case, it's there has to be balance. And the answer to the riddle, as a friend of mine says, is somewhere in the middle. It's like where there is autonomy, but there's a lot of compassion, where there's a lot of bravery, but there's also listening and empathy and consideration for others. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the human experience, is that joy, pain, openness, being closed and retracted. And it's being to explore all these things in their depth and in their most extreme expressions is what leads to truly beautiful and dynamic creative expressions. It's not. It's in a way, I think it's the moment that you try to oversimplify the processes, you find that the simplification leads nowhere. Because it's beautiful when it's complicated. It's not complicated. It's beautiful when it's complex. It's beautiful when it's diverse. It's beautiful when, again, there's an element of mischief, which makes you question everything that you've said or that you believe in. And I think that's what keeps things interesting. Again, now I'm quoting Alan Watts for the third time today, which is a bit excessive. The universe is just playing hide and seek with itself. So this kind of whole process of saying, I got it. I don't got it. I figured it out. No, apparently not, And even in science as well, Newton figured it out. And it's like, no, actually there's quantum physics. And that's, again, the beauty. It never ends. Keep bubbling.
We've been talking about this immense amount of beauty that metaphor type folks can bring to the world, can contribute, can imagine, can act on. And you did touch on this throughout different pieces where you're like, let's make sure we're checking ourselves in this way, or making sure we don't go too extreme in this way over here. But I'm curious, every type has what we could call their superpowers, these amazing, beautiful things that we've talked about. But then I think there is this thing that we also want to make sure that, and we're not perfect, we do have the spectrum between causing joy and causing harm. And so I'm curious what kind of things you notice that you just check in with, or have community help check for you, so that you stay on this path that feels like truly is a path of beauty.
I would say that not taking yourself too seriously is very good. Like, and in everything, especially in the music, we have beautiful moments of reverent cosmic bliss, and we usually have to break the spell by that was fun. Just don't take yourself too seriously. There is a trickster in the universe, and it doesn't. It's not that it doesn't. There's something that doesn't want to be captured. There's something that's always just outside of our grasp, and that goes hand in hand with humility as well. When people forget that their creative gift does not make them the creator. It's like the whole story of tech bros that go to the Amazon, try ayahuasca and say, "Oh, I understood. I'm God." And you're like, no, that's not exactly what the lesson was supposed to be. And you lose the humility. So I think that those are probably the most important things, is that really understand that in a sense we have infinite power, and yet at the same time we're completely insignificant. So the people that I love hanging out with and the people that keep me in check are all people with fantastic sense of humor. They're well-accomplished, very talented human beings that don't take themselves too seriously. They're human beings that always feel they have something to learn, that always check what they said just to make sure, that everything is still resonant and true. But again, that requires trust. And it's funny that you mentioned the collective, like who do you surround yourself by? And one of the reasons that I love being in Ibiza is because there's such a critical mass of people who really feel that we are bringing about the change, and that sounds pompous, but we don't take it too seriously. We do our best. We admit that it's in our nature to try to prototype better humanity. It's in our nature to try to make more beautiful music. It's in our nature to try to grow crops and food in a way that's much more in line with Mother Earth. But, don't take yourself too seriously about it. It's just, it's just human. And it's funny because it's almost like it's like a checks and balances thing here. Anybody who comes to the island, at least in, our community, and promises to be the one to save us all or has the solution to everything, is a person who's not going to entertain a lot of attention. In music, there's actually a very interesting thing, is that nothing in modern music is in tune. Nothing is truly in tune. It's not. And this has nothing to do with people saying there's the 4-3-2 or something. It's just the relationship between notes, something called the tempered scale, that they just don't tune properly because there's imperfections. There's something that makes the masterpiece incomplete or a little bit crooked, And so for me, again, the more I try to approximate to absolute truths, the more I find myself encountering exceptions. I was actually on the plane this morning and with this younger guy, and we're talking about morality. And I said, I shared one of my favorite sayings. I said that rules are for the foolish to follow and the wise to heed. Meaning that there's, maybe dancing on the table is forbidden in this restaurant, but there's definitely a time for dancing on the table, right? There's a moment to, speeding is illegal, but there's definitely a moment for speeding. There's, stealing is bad, but perhaps there's a moment when stealing is exactly what you have to do. The same thing we've all encountered, but sometimes telling the truth is the worst thing you can do. And I think that, again, it's funny because we started the conversation speaking about mischief and this, these kind of little moments of nope, it's the other way around. It's like that person you thought was the most moral and smartest human being. Apparently, no. There's cracks there. There's deep cracks, and I think that that's kind of the universe reminding us to be humble. I was like saying, the more you try to figure me out, the more you're going to struggle.
I am grateful to say that my last question that I ask everybody is a bit of a mischief twist, which is I reverse roles. And I ask you, what's something you wish I would have asked? What did I miss? What did you want to talk about? What did we skip over? What did you have for breakfast and you thought that was super important? Whatever it is that you want to share, that is either about the big concepts we've been talking about or something more personal or anything in between.
That's funny. I actually wanted to ask about the archetypes a bit more. But that's not a question that I wanted to ask myself. That's more where I would have wanted to entertain that kind of context of how you imagine these creators and how we all fit in. But that's again taking your question and not even
throwing it back at me,
rather than dodging it, like turning it into something new and go, here, play with that.
The mischief upon mischief.
Yeah.
That is hanging out with Jurgis. Ultimately, I view them as a spectrum of a rainbow. And so over here we have our reds, and of course reds are also magentas, and of course they're also ambers, and there's no clear line, just like there's no clear line between the fungus and the tree root, but it helps if we say red. And so thus we have an archetype that fits into red. And that archetype is the kind that I call molecular or scientific. And for that, it's very precision focused. It is the people that do the controlled experiments, that follow a precise line. They love graphs. They love using language in a very defined way, because then they feel like that definition gives them the leaping off point to explore from. When we shift over to the orange realm of things, we get the network type. These are our ecologists. These are our economic folk. These are people that see perhaps world in a more nodular way. So we have our little node over here, a little node over here, a little node over here. And oh, how interesting to see these connection points between them. And then we get into the center that kind of is this most ubiquitous place in between this rainbow, and we're going to call that yellow. And there we get designers, we get weavers. These are people that definitely see, we got, strings over here and strings over here, and we weave them together. And depending on which one's on top gives us this whole different image that we can play with on top of it. And it's very much about interconnectedness. So here we have community organizers. Here we have architects. Here we have people like Buckminster Fuller. And then we jump over to our blues over here, and that's where we get our artist types. That's where we get our metaphors. These are where there is a lot of relationship, but those relationships are within these juxtapositions that we create with these different symbols, and by how we shape those symbols and put them in relationship to each other will say different things. If it's two notes, you can do an infinite amount with those two notes, simply depending on how you position them against or with one another. And then finally, we get to our purples, and then we get our mystics. We get our earbuds falling out of our ears. We get our embodiment types. And they are the ones that will remind us to always be in our body. These are the people that, in comparison to the molecular types, they will view any kind of language as a pale translation to the lived experience of the Sufis that spin, and the people that feel that their ancestors are represented in a field of sunflowers. They are a way to look at ultimately what you talked about at the very beginning, which is when you land within a certain color or a certain type, you kind of feel like, oh, I resonate here. These are people that speak the same language as I do. The way that I use the term coexistence is the same way that these people say, compared to if you ask, like, as an artist, I can play with that word all day long. But if you talk to somebody who's more of a molecular type, they will actually say, oh, actually, that word has this precise definition. And now let me tell you about all those super cool things about it.
Right.
And so those kind of the spectrum of ways of understanding, oh, I belong here. Well, do you want to take us out in any kind of song?
Song. Yeah, maybe. Hold on. Da, 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 da. If we are animate soil, if we are fruit of the earth, if we are nature in flesh, expressions of death and rebirth, eyes on the heavens, feet on the ground, a haunting suspicion what's lost can be found. If there is hope in your heart, know that you're not alone. That swelling sense of belief will grow. It will grow, grow. How do we know? How do we know? How do we know that the seeds we've planted? How do we know? How do we know? How do we know that the seeds we've planted will grow? They will grow. They will grow, grow. How do we know? How do we know? How do we know that the seeds we're planting will grow? Something like that. Again, the issue of trust. Zach Bush said that it's in a seed's nature to grow. It doesn't question itself. It just does its thing. So an encouragement to all the artists to just do their thing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jurgis. Such a delight to connect with you again. Hey, Earthmate. How did that episode resonate? Did it stretch you, inspire you, or perhaps irk you? I'm here for it, so please reach out. Besides the socials, we have a community to practice with on our website, eartharchetypes.com, where more Earth archetypes can guide your path and become dear friends. A great place to start is the quiz to discover your type. Oh, and on your way, I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button. See you again soon.